In 1944, American fighter pilots who strafed German airfields faced death at 4 times the rate of aerial combat, torn apart by an invisible wall of flak called the Feuerwand. The Luftwaffe's trap was perfect, with every gun ready and every approach calculated. But the most foolish move imaginable would soon expose one fatal flaw, and everything Americans thought about survival and strategy was about to be upended. Here is how that suicide mission began. Pilots called it a meat grinder. Strafing a German airfield in 1944 meant flying straight into a nightmare, one that chewed up even the best. The numbers were brutal. For every pilot lost in a dogfight, 4 more were shot down trying to attack on the deck. Men who had survived months of combat, who had stared down Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs at 20,000 feet, were now being cut down in seconds by ground fire they could not even see. The approach was always the same. Drop low, line up with the runway, then hammer the enemy's parked planes before they could take off. But the Luftwaffe had learned every move. American fighters would roll in, only to be met by a curtain of invisible shrapnel, flak guns firing from hidden pits, trees, and camouflaged bunkers. The sky filled with black bursts and tracer fire, so dense that pilots described it as flying through a thunderstorm made of steel. Squadrons returned missing half their men. Aircraft came back riddled, engines coughing, cockpits smeared with oil and blood. Survivors told of seeing friends' planes vanish in fireballs or spiraling down into the trees. In a single week, entire units could be wiped out on the ground. The mission was supposed to cripple the Luftwaffe. Instead, it was breaking the American fighter force. Every pilot knew the odds. Every mission felt like a coin toss with death. And still, the orders kept coming. Attack the airfields no matter the cost. German airfields in 1944 were not just defended. They were engineered for slaughter. Around the perimeter, belts of anti-aircraft guns formed layers of defense. 20mm cannons sat closest to the runways, ready to spit out hundreds of rounds at low-flying fighters. Behind them, heavier 37mm and 40mm guns waited, their barrels set to sweep the sky at key approach angles. At the largest bases, dozens of flak positions, sometimes as many as 40 or more, were dug in, camouflaged, and pre-registered on every likely path of attack. But the real ingenuity lay in the geometry. Luftwaffe planners studied wind charts and local weather. Western Europe's prevailing winds meant most runways were aligned east-west. Aircraft, both German and Allied, almost always took off and landed facing east, into the wind. American pilots, drilled in efficiency, attacked along that same axis, diving from the east, running the length of the runway, and pulling out to the west. It was the most stable shot, the longest possible firing window. The Germans built their defenses around this predictability. Nearly every heavy gun was trained eastward, their fields of fire overlapping into a single, lethal corridor. The result was a pre-registered kill zone, a mathematical funnel that concentrated fire on any aircraft approaching from the expected direction. Allied pilots called it the Feuerwand, the firewall. To enter that corridor was to fly into a storm of shrapnel and tracer, all calculated, all waiting. No matter how skilled the pilot, the outcome was almost always the same. Under these conditions, loss was not just likely. It was built into the system. Hubert Zemke ran his fighter group like a laboratory. While others relied on instinct and routine, he demanded evidence. Every mission produced a stack of debriefs, each pilot's account cross-checked against the next. Reconnaissance photos lined his desk, grainy images of airfields, gun pits, and blast craters. He mapped every flak position, noting which guns were camouflaged, which had clear lines of fire, and which sectors looked strangely empty. In his notebooks, sketches of airfield layouts tangled with wind arrows and attack vectors. He logged burst patterns from flak, matching them to approach angles and altitudes. Anytime a pilot survived a run, Zemke grilled him for details. Where did the fire come from? How close did it track? Did you see the muzzle flashes or only the bursts? Over weeks, a picture started to form. A pattern that did not fit the official doctrine. The data pointed to a glaring asymmetry in the defenses. The eastern side of every field was a fortress, but the west was thin, almost neglected. Zemke trusted numbers over habit. He saw what the maps and mission reports were telling him, even if it went against everything pilots had been taught. The answer was not more bravery or firepower. It was a question of direction, a simple change that could save lives and win battles. Zemke gathered his officers in the cramped briefing room and delivered a single, jarring order. Attack from the west. The room froze. Decades of flight training, doctrine, and survival instinct said this was madness. One pilot spoke up, saying, "Sir, that's a crosswind run. We'll have barely any time to aim. It's suicide." Another muttered about the short firing window, the risk of overshooting, the unpredictable winds. Zemke let the doubts hang in the air, then pointed to his notebook. Columns of casualty rates, sketches of flak arcs, the blank space on the western perimeter. He didn't raise his voice. "Dead pilots don't destroy anything," he said. The line cut through every objection. For months, men had been dying by the book. Zemke's proposal broke every rule, but it was rooted in cold math and a refusal to accept pointless loss. Leadership in that moment meant daring to be called a fool. The room fell silent as the logic sank in. Orders were issued. The plan would be tested in combat. No more theory, no more debate. May 8, 1944. The Wolfpack's P-47 Thunderbolts streaked toward Aschersleben at treetop height, engines roaring just above the fields of central Germany. 16 Thunderbolts, led by seasoned aces like Walker Mahurin and Robert Johnson, hugged the Earth so closely that German radar screens stayed blank. Every heavy flak gun on the base, dozens of them, was pointed east, waiting for an attack that never came. Instead, the Americans slammed in from the west at over 300 miles per hour, barely 20 feet off the ground. The first warning the Luftwaffe gunners had was the sudden thunder of 850 caliber machine guns on each plane opening up. Parked fighters and bombers erupted in fire, fuel tanks splitting, wings sheared away. German crews scrambled to swing their big guns around, but the traverse took precious seconds, 6 seconds, sometimes 9 seconds, while the P-47 aircraft were already passed within 4 seconds. In less than a minute, the Wolfpack tore through the airfield and vanished. 23 enemy aircraft burned on the ground. Not a single American plane was lost. Zemke's gamble had become proof. The so-called fortress had a blind side, and the right attack could shatter it in seconds. Within weeks of the Aschersleben strike, briefing rooms across the 8th Air Force echoed with new instructions. The standard attack run from east to west, straight down the runway, was quietly phased out. Instead, pilots studied maps for weak flak sectors, memorized crosswind approaches, and drilled on ultra-low, high-speed entries from the least expected direction. Intelligence officers tracked results. Reports showed that out of 63 strafing missions flown before D-Day, At least 47 used the reverse or off-axis pattern. The numbers told the story. American loss rates on airfield attacks, once as high as 8.3%, fell to just over 2%. Ground kills soared, with twice as many German aircraft destroyed on the ground per mission compared to earlier months. The Luftwaffe, caught off balance, scrambled to adapt. Orders went out to shift gun crews, reinforce western perimeters, and scatter aircraft into woods and camouflaged revetments. But there were never enough guns or trained men to cover every angle, and resources stretched thin as airfields came under daily assault. By June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe's presence over Normandy had dwindled to a handful of sorties. The airfields that once fed the German fighter arm had become graveyards, not launch pads. The doctrine had changed, and with it, the balance of air power in Western Europe. Innovation in war rarely comes from more firepower. It comes from seeing what others miss. In every field, entrenched systems still crumble to a single, well-placed question. The next breakthrough will not look obvious until someone dares to ask it. What blind spot are we defending today?